it's Adam from Pixel, and welcome back. Now, it's about time we have this conversation today. And the reason I'm saying that is because I've been putting this off for quite some time. It's a big one, and it's one that I need to approach in as responsible a way possible. I'm thinking to myself that I'm very possibly sharing advice with you that you might need to take up with your loved ones. I might be potentially initiating a conversation that you need to have with them. I also know that I might be offering you some advice or swaying your judgment in a way that can have a very transformative impact on relationships. I know because that's what happened to me, and it's a reality that I faced in my life. And judging by the comments, a lot of the comments that I've heard on my videos in the past, as well as my students and my friends, I've seen this happen a lot. It's very common. And the topic is a bit multifaceted, but the overlying topic is basically living with people who, for one reason or another, don't value or respect or understand the artistic career. In some cases, might even try to interfere with your artistic growth, possibly for good reason, or at least to them good reason, where they feel that like they're putting your best interest in mind, or they think that they're making a responsible decision for you. But it could also be for very negative reasons like possessiveness or jealousy or control. And I want to kind of tap on all of these because at some point in your life or another, you might very well need to navigate around this. And I really wished I had someone to guide me through these situations because they were very tough to deal with. And at the time, I had no idea what to do with them. And I can't say in every case I made the best decision. So I'd like you to be able to learn from some of my mistakes or some of the mistakes of my friends and how I would have done things differently now that I can look back in hindsight. And the first one is probably the most balanced reason, or at least the one that requires a lot of thought and consideration on how to approach it. And that is parents, guardians, or loved ones who are potentially responsible for your artistic career or your artistic education, who disagree with you pursuing art as a career. And this is quite common. I mean, you have to understand too where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the perspective of somebody who teaches students from every single corner of the planet. International, you name it. You name a country, I've taught somebody from that area. And we have a lot of personal conversations, and very often people's perspectives of parenthood, people's perspectives of education are very different from one place to another. In some cultures, children will rebel against their parents, and their parents are just going to have to deal with it, and that's just life. And you know, they tell their parents, I'm going to do what I want to do, whether you like it or not, and I'm going to do my own thing. And that's to a certain degree acceptable, or the parents learn to navigate around that. In other cases, however, it's not so cut and dry. And there's a very good chance that a gesture, taking a step like that, could cause you to be excommunicated from your family, or have your lifeline unplugged, and your money, your education money pulled out from under you, and leave you powerless, leave you in a position of loss and nothing to gain. And that can be a very scary situation for you to be in. And from a responsible perspective, I would have to say, you need to be smart, and you need to think about you have to think about your career long term. What do I mean by this? Well, for starters, if you live in a culture, or you live with a parent who comes from a background where your parent decides your education, at least the early stages of your education, and they decide for you that you are not going to pursue art. You need to pursue something that's going to offer you a little bit more independence. There may very well be an important reason why they're doing that. Maybe for social reasons or for economic reasons. A lack of independence where you live can be life-threatening. It can be dangerous for your career. It can impact an entire family. And in all due honesty, pursuing a career as risky as art, because art is very often a risk, particularly in the early phases, that biting the hand that feeds you is not just biting the hand that feeds you, it's biting everybody's hand through the whole chain of your family. Very often a lot of families live together, multi-generations that all live together in the same house. This is very common worldwide. You have to think about the big picture of your family. However, this is not to mean abandon your passion. This does not mean abandon being an artist. My advice to you instead, and this is something, again, that I very strongly encourage you to bring up with your family. Discuss this with them. Play this video and say, hey, I was listening to a guy on YouTube and he gave me some advice that I want you to listen to. I want to hear what you think about this. Because remember, I'm just one perspective, and bouncing my perspective off of different realities can help you to navigate around this and pursue a path that allows you to get the best out of your life that you want. So definitely share this with them. In this particular case, I encourage that. I've shared a story in the past about where my mother had pursued art despite having a father, a very, very masculine, very deep-voiced Polish father, my grandfather Zygmunt, who believed that if you weren't an engineer, you were quite literally a bum. Because being an engineer was the only real job you could possibly have. And he would slam the door in the faces of gentlemen callers who'd show up at the door because their fathers were not engineers. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. He was that nuts. But my mother pursued art anyways. My mother's the type of person, if you slam the front door on her, she'll hop out the back window. She was stubborn, and she would pursue what she wanted, and she was willing to piss him off doing that. But she could, because she knew that ultimately her father was going to be there. Ultimately, he might get pissed off and he might disagree with her choices, but he'd have to deal with it eventually. And she never felt unsafe making a choice like that in her life. But what if you do? What if that means I'm pulling your funding? You're not going to get an education. If you don't get an education, you're in a very bad state. So what do you do in that case? Well, what my mother ended up doing was hanging up her paintbrush for a while. This is something I shared in my video just a couple of weeks ago, because she had to feed kids. She was a single mom who had to feed kids. And it's my mother who ended up having to go back with only a fine art degree, going back to school and getting a degree in computer science. That taught me one of the most valuable lessons in my life, which was, in order to live a full career, you have to think of both sides of the coin. It's not all about passion. It's not all about money. You have to be able to pay your bills. You have to find a way to make yourself financially stable, to have that kind of independence. But you also have to have your passion. And there's times for everything. In her case, she started with the passion, and then she did the practical. And when she combined them together, she ended up making a great career for herself and never gave up being an artist in her heart. And she's still painting to this day. You might just have to do it the other way around. You need to first prove to your family, you need to prove that you are capable of taking care of yourself, that you have a skill that will pay the bills. You'll have a skill that will give you strength and independence. You need that education first. Once your parents see that, or whoever it is that's responsible for you sees that you are capable of doing something like that, they are far more likely to loosen the reins and say, okay, now you can pursue your passion on the side. And you might be able to, at that point, find a creative way, just like my mother did, to combine those two skills together to create something very unique and make yourself very employable, like computer graphics, right? Fine arts, computer science, computer graphics. That's what ended up happening with my mother. So you might just need to make the practical decision first and then pursue your passion after. And there's absolutely no harm in that. And it should also prove as a testament to your resolve, to your conviction to pursue something. If you like they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. If you have to be forced away from the thing you love, if it only makes the flame inside you burn hotter, the longer you stay away from it, then when you do finally pursue it, you're going to pursue it with every fiber of your being, and your growth will be astronomical. And you'll be able to really enjoy the fruits of your career while having that kind of independence. And you will not be stepping on anybody's toes, putting anybody else at risk in the process of doing that. So, like I said, this type of thing, I encourage you to share with your loved ones, with your guardians, for those who are responsible for you, if you find yourself in a situation like this. There's another type of situation that's not so compassionate. It might be just having controlling people in your life. Sometimes it's parents, but it can also very often be lovers. It can be partners in your life. It can sometimes be friends. Usually, more often than not, it's somebody who you're trying to make a life with. And to give you an example of this, in my life, I've dealt with challenges pursuing art with a couple of different people in my life for slightly different reasons. In one particular case, it was because I was with somebody who had a heart of gold. She was a very compassionate person. She was a very caring person. She was not controlling, not intentionally at least, but just didn't understand art. She came from a very different background. She didn't have an artistic bone in her body. We didn't connect as a couple through our artistry. We connected through other things, through other passions and stuff like that in life. But she really just didn't get art. And that ultimately ended up coming at the cost of our relationship. And it's not for a lack of trying. It's not for a lack of compassion. It's not for a lack of dedication. It was for a lack of our ability to communicate. It was this, again, I'm not talking about anybody who had any ill intent whatsoever. At least not in that regard. But when I talk about art, when I talk about passion, when I talk about the things that excited me every day, I could see her eyes glaze over. She had no clue what I was talking about. And she came from such a practical career path from a small town where people didn't really talk that way and stuff. She saw it as being eccentric and hard to connect with and just kind of tuned out. And she was just interested in very different things. And she would get very excited talking with her friends who were very much in the same type of career as hers. And every time I'd listen to them talk, I swear to God, I felt like I wanted to slam my head between two freight cars. Just like, oh my God, I can't listen to this. It's the most mind-grueling crap I've ever heard in my life. But she could go on with it for hours. We just weren't compatible in that regard. And I remember telling a story. I repeat a lot of stories. At least that's what my friend. I'm sure I've said this before on my channel. But I remember sitting down at a cafe. I was studying animation at the time. I was in university, and I was sitting in a cafe sketching as I did every day. And this pretty young Indian woman with hair down to the back of her knees asked if she could sit down at the table with me. And there was plenty of places to sit, but I was like, yeah, sure, okay, fine. You can have a seat if you want to. It was a bit of an odd request since there was a lot of empty tables, but she was definitely up to something, I could tell. And she sits down and she says, I'll tell you what, for your kind gesture of letting me sit at your table, I'd like to read your fortune for you. I'll read your poem. A very forward thing for somebody to do. And I was like, okay, fine. And she took my hand and she started to, I guess you could say she started to cold read me, all right? Very good cold reader. If she wasn't psychic, she was one hell of a cold reader. She told me all these things. She was telling me about my relationships in my life and who I'm closer to and everything like that. Kind of stuff most intuitive people could pick up. And then she says, you're in a relationship with somebody you're not in love with. And I looked at her and I said, no, you're wrong. And she goes, no, I'm right. She's challenging me, right? And I'm like, yeah, she's a cocky little woman, you know? And I said, no, I love her. No, she goes, no, you don't understand. You're not in love with her. You definitely love her. She's a good person, but you're not in love with her. She's not your type, and you know it. Even if she was cold reading me, it was what I needed to hear. It was the right thing at the right time at a moment in my life where I felt like I was suffocating in the relationship and I didn't know why. I always remember that moment in my life. She kind of taught me at that point that being an artist is a very unique thing. We have a unique way of communicating. Does that mean you need to date an artist? You need to marry an artist? No, absolutely not. You don't need to at all. In fact, sometimes that's not always a good thing, because two artists can actually be very competitive with each other. Not always, but there can be a lot of competition in that regard. Not that I would discourage being with an artist, but you definitely need compatibility there. But you need at least somebody who understands what you do. You need somebody who understands how you communicate. Somebody who communicates in an emotional way. Somebody who communicates in a visual way. Somebody who can see things the same way you do and can appreciate that. Because if you don't, what's going to end up happening is it's going to eventually dissolve your relationship. Or you're just going to have to live an external life. You're going to have to find somebody else to have passion with, and then you come home and you have your practical relationship with your partner. Some people are perfectly happy doing that, and if you're happy kind of splitting your life up, that's great. You don't necessarily have to be with an artist, but definitely be with somebody who appreciates it. Be with somebody who can admire what it is that you do, or take joy, if not fascination, in your passion, as you should with them. Hell, if I dated an astrophysicist, I think I would be her biggest fan. I'm completely addicted to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I listen to him all the time. Or David Attenborough. These are my uncles I wish I had. My grandpas I wish I had. They're fascinating people that have very creative minds. Astrophysics science is a very creative thing. So is programming. Programming can be a very passionate. If you're talking to somebody who has a creative mind, programming can be very creative. And you can find that commonality. You can find that compatible wavelength with people in completely different careers, but they have to share that passion. And then there's one last one. There's one last type of scenario that's a little bit more serious. And that's when when the passion might be there and the flame might be there, but whoever you're with, who's not your guardian, who's not your parent, who doesn't have your best interest in mind, doesn't like the career choice that you've picked. They don't like certain aspects of the artistic career. Maybe they're jealous of the fact that you need to study nudes, and they're very jealous of that kind of stuff. Maybe they don't like the amount of time that you need to spend away from them. Maybe they're too possessive of your time, and they need your undivided attention 24 hours a day. And if you try to divert your attention, then they retaliate against it, or they punish you emotionally, or they do something like that to make you feel like your relationship is at risk. And that's a very different story. And I've been in that situation too. I was in one relationship, for instance, with somebody who completely didn't understand the time and energy and focus and privacy that artists very often need. Like, I'm in a family full of artists. I have, Emily, who's studying illustration right now, and I'm an artist, and I've got very artistic kids. When you get caught up in a creative endeavor, hours flick by in seconds. Time flies. When I'm painting, 6-7 hours go by. I didn't even see the clock go. A lot of artists, for that very reason, that's one of the reasons why artists are very often night owls, because it's when they have complete privacy. It's when they have complete quiet and they can do their thing, where there's nobody asking them for anything. They don't have any phones to answer. They can just put music on and just be in their zone. Frank Frazetta was known for doing that, being a very family guy. He never liked to, if you ever watch a documentary on Frazetta, his parents always described him as being a very dedicated father. It's a very important thing to him, and husband for that matter. He never wanted his career to interfere with his family life. So when he would get a contract, he would pull off one of his masterpiece paintings overnight. He would pull them off in a single night, and when his kids were sleeping. And when he'd wake up in the morning, his wife would have to poke him. He would be passed out on the couch. She'd have to poke him with a stick to get him to wake up. because it required that much focus and that much concentration to be able to do what he did. But it took a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I've been in relationships with people who didn't respect that time. Not because they just didn't understand. It's because their time was more valuable to them. And they didn't respect what it was that I needed to do. So I would say, okay, I'm going to need to do some work. And they'd say, yeah, okay, fine. And then I'd lock myself in a room, and 15 minutes later, you done? I'm like, dude, I just sharpened my pencil. What, it took you 15 minutes to sharpen your pencil? I said, yeah. And I've got another 14 pencils in my pencil case. So, I'm trying to work here. Oh, fine. All right, fine. They'd hum and haw and they'd leave. 15 minutes later. You done yet? And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, no. Listen, I'm going to be busy for the next 5 hours. Like, this is going to take some time. 5 hours? What do you mean 5 hours? I thought we were going to do something today. No, we didn't make any plans. Today I'm just planning to do my art. Just let me do you can go out, call your friends up, do something, have fun. I'm going to be busy today. I'll call you when I'm done. You're going to call me when you're done. Oh, mister, And then they'd walk away huffy puffy. It would inevitably lead to a fight. It would lead to an argument. And when you get yourself into an argument and your emotional state's been completely rattled, you just don't want to paint anymore. And this happened time after time after time. Not only that, but I remember having art books, very popular sketchbooks that were art how to draw books that were done back in the 1950s and 60s and stuff like that. They're still in publication today. And they had some nudes, but sketched nudes. They weren't even photographic nudes. Not that there's a problem with photographic nudes, but they were sketch. And she looked at it and she goes, "That's what you want to look at? That's what you want to look at?" And she tore the book to pieces. She tore multiple books to pieces. These were expensive books that I really loved. These were really prized possessions to me. She tore them to pieces because she was jealous, because she didn't want me staring at other naked bodies. And we were deep in a relationship at this point. And we had a lot of shared responsibilities at this point. This wasn't just somebody I was dating for a couple of months and could get up and walk away from. There was a real commitment made in our relationship, but things went sour very quickly at a certain point. There was nothing I could do. If I wanted to produce art, if I wanted to do my thing, it came at the cost of my peace. It came at the cost of my peace of mind. I cared about her. I loved her a lot. It was a relationship that mattered to me, and I was very, very torn on what to do. And thankfully, eventually that relationship dissolved. It was a very tumultuous, very toxic relationship, a very controlling situation. I mean, I'm just giving you a very short, brief example, but this kind of stuff went on every single day. If you're in a relationship that's controlling, possessive, jealous, that doesn't respect the artistic process, what you need to do, what you need to learn to be able to perform your job, an artist needs to study the human body, needs to study anatomy, needs to study nudes as much as a doctor does. Doctors and artists share a lot of common skills in their practice. If the time and the energy and the research does not suit the fancy or challenges the very, very delicate, fragile ego of your very controlling partner in your life, if you're in a position where you don't feel like your health is being threatened or that you're potentially challenging your safety by leaving this person, if you don't leave them today, you're going to leave them eventually. Either you're going to leave them or they're going to leave you. And it's going to end on a very bad note. Take my word for it. It's not going to end well. So if the door is open, I suggest you walk through it. But I'm not saying just get up and leave. I'm not pulling an Adam told me to leave, so I'm going to leave. Bye. I'm not saying that. Think about your situation. Think about where you are. When I walked into that relationship, I was an artist. They fell in love with me as an artist. This is something that happens all the time in life, isn't it? You want to make the person you love happy. Of course. But remember that they were happy when you met them. So there's no reason why you should change. If somebody tells you need to change, the answer is no. I'm not going to change. This is who I am. You don't like my art books? Well, then you don't like me, because I'm an artist, and that's my art book. Go buy me another effing art book. You just ripped mine up. But in all due honesty, if somebody ever ripped up my art book, you wouldn't be able to blink fast enough to see me fly out that window like a puff of smoke. I would be gone. In hindsight, I never would have gone through that shit again. But I did at the time because I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to challenge somebody's jealousy. I'd never dealt with possessive, jealous people in the past, so I didn't know how to deal with it. I dealt with it wrong. I wouldn't do that again. And if you find yourself in that kind of a situation and you have the safety of leaving, start planning your exit. Either way, you got to get yourself out of that kind of situation. So, to summarize what I'm saying today, it's a tough topic, and there's so many variables within what I've shared with you today that can come between you and your passion. I've just shared a few extreme situations here. In the end, who you are today is who you're going to be in 50 years, no matter what anybody tries. Whether you need to take a practical approach, focus on the practical, focus on the career and the stability first, because people are depending on you, because culturally it is the responsible thing to do, then do that. If you live in a culture where you don't necessarily need to be obedient all the time, then you might have a little bit more financial flexibility, then it's always a better route to communicate with the person who you disagree with and say, this is really what I want, this is really what I love, and if you love me and respect me, you'll respect my passions. But don't just do it behind their back if it's not necessary. That's my fatherly advice to you today, from one parent to another, if other parents are listening. But if you find yourself in a possessive, jealous, irresponsible, controlling, or worst case scenario, abusive situation, you got to get out of there. Anybody who challenges your existence, anybody who tries to force you through any kind of manipulation, abuse, threat, punishment, remember something. You're a partner. You're not a psychologist. You're not their child. You're their partner. And if they don't treat you like a partner, then they don't deserve you. With that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.